Hello guys, I'm Melisa with a student identification number 1951093. Now I will discuss the private international law with you. So let's start our discussion today. So here the first that you need to know here, what is private international law? Private international law here is the entire rule and legal judgment that determines which law applies in the case of a dispute between two or more people of different nationalities. Private international law question which jurisdiction should be disputed, which law are used in such dispute, and how the law is enforced. The disputes refer to include matters maybe marriage, divorce, child custody, trade contract with the foreigner. The second one that we need to know is the history of the private international law. So how is the history of the private international law here? So we will start from Roman Empire period. That one is start from 2nd to 6th century. At this time, the pattern of international relations was still simple but has begun to appear with the existence of the relationship between the Roman citizens and the inhabitants of the province that were part of the empire due to the occupation in which the original inhabitants of the province were considered foreigners and were subject to the law themselves. And then the second one here is the period of the growth of the personal principle. That one is the start from 6th to 10th century. The fall of the Roman Empire made Roman law obsolete and was replaced by customary law, personal law, family law, and different religious law. So problems with the international civil law have gradually emerged, but they do not have a clear dispute resolution mechanism like during the Roman Empire. But here there have been development in international civil law. There is this. The first one is the dispute resolution process uses the law of the defendant. And then the second one is the legalization of a marriage must be made based on the husband party law. And then the third here is the growth of the territorial principle. And then here in Northern Europe, feudalism developed, and this had an impact on the law, namely the landlord law, which was exclusive to anyone who was in their territory. Foreign rights are not recognized, including rights that are actually regulated in public international law. Meanwhile, in Southern Europe, the growth of the trading cities in Italy made international civil law an important role in resolving disputes between the parties. This is where the principle of law enforcement based on residence in the same city, or often referred to as statute theory, is born. And the next one, the fourth one, is the growth of statute theory. Here, Accursius and classify it into three groups. The first group here is the personal status, the objects of which are personal and family and extraterritorial in nature. The second group is the relia status, the object of which is to regulate object and legal status of object and have territorial principle. The third group is the mixta status, which regulates legal action based on a territorial principle. And the next, the development of status theory in France. The increasing activity of trade between provinces in France made international civil law necessary to study in resolving legal disputes that arise, considering that each province has its own law. So they have own law. And the next one, the development of status theory in the Netherlands. The development of status theory in the Netherlands emphasizes the exclusive sovereignty of the state. Ulrich Huber has three principles in viewing international civil law cases. That here the law of a country only apply within the territorial boundaries of the country. And and the second one is all legal subjects permanently or temporarily within the territory of a sovereign state are legal subject of that state and are subject to and bound by the law of that country. But the law applicable in the country of origin can have the power to apply everywhere as long as it does not conflict with the interest of the legal subject of the country giving the recognition. And the last here of our discussion about history. The last is the universal theory. Here, C.G. von Wachter assessed that the Italian status theory creates legal uncertainty because of its extraterritorial nature that results in legal obligation in foreign countries. The starting point for determining the law that should be applied in case of international law is the law of the place which is the domicile of the beginning of a certain legal relationship. Thus, the lex fori or the law where the court is located should be enforced as the competing law in international civil law case. The third one that we need to know from our discussion today is the what benefit of private international law here. So the development of private international law based on the fact of the coexistence of various legal systems in the world equal. Every lawmaker in a country basically forms the law according to the needs or situation that exists in his country. But sometimes there are legal events in the case of connection or relevance to more than one system law of states when the existing reality is related to the material. Private international law will always cause certain problems become a major problems that we already study. Private international law have a benefit that we can know which judge or judicial body is authorized to resolve judicial problems that contain foreign elements, and then which laws should be enacted to regulate and or resolve judicial problems that contain foreign elements. And the last is the when or through what action a court must pay attention and recognize a legal right or obligation issues based on the law or the decision of a foreign judge. The fourth one that we need to know here, the private international law have a principle. So the principle that form the basis for the formation of private international law, that is, the first is the principle of nationality or lex patriae. This one is the principle that applies national law someone who applies in determining personal status someone. So the second one is domicile principle or lex domicili. Here is the principle that applies the domicile law someone who applies in determining personal status someone. The third one is the principle of freedom of contract is a general principle given by law in making a contract which exists in Article 133 Act of the Civil Code. And then the fourth one is the lex fori principle, the principle that enforces the law of the judge in a private international law event. And the fifth is the lex loci contractus principle, a principle that applies through the law of place making a contract in the agreement. And the sixth is the lex loci solution principle. Here, a principle that applies to the law of place implementation of the agreement. So here, the differentiation of the fifth and then the sixth is here. Fifth is lex loci contractus principle. Here is the place making a contract in the agreement. So place that you make agreement. But the sixth one is lex loci solution principle. Here is the implementation of the agreement. Place implementation of the agreement. So here have a difference between number 5 and number 6. Here, the 7 is the proper law of the contract is a law that applies in a contract is a law of the country that has a linking point the most. The 8 first about the legal resources. National law is based on customary law and law written. Start well for private international law is based on customary law and law formed by will which states in the international community. The next one, subject. The subject of national law are existing individuals within a country, while the subject of international law is member country of the international community. And the next one is the strength of law. National law has full and binding force perfect when compared to international law, once more of a regulatory nature of the relations of states horizontally. The next, why is there have a private international law? Why we have private international law here? Private international law that we already discussed in part 1. What is private international law? In there we already know why we have private international law. So private international law can arise because of the increasing numbers of cases that contain foreign elements or cases from one country to another. So more than one country. So here, private international law is to make us easier for judge or case to find the right law and fair decision. So the last of our discussion today, I will include one case about private international law here. I will make one example of private international law case. For example, Mr. Kasi is an Indonesian citizen domiciled in Malaysia. He is married to Miss Nana, and Malaysia lady who live in Malaysia. They got married in Singapore and they own property in Singapore. But in the end, Mr. Kasi died, and before he died, he wrote a wills in Indonesian because Miss Nana was a Malaysian who wanted to conduct a court in Malaysia, but because the will uses Indonesian, which have a differentiation Malaysian and Indonesian, so he has to go to the Indonesian court. Here that we can see in this case already have a forum shopping and renvoi. That's why Miss Nana feels allowed to be Indonesian too. So for this case, the correct place for it is in Indonesia because the testament or the wills is in Indonesia. So that's all our discussion today. So